So initially, I had every intention of uploading the death of Deadpool today, but then I started thinking that I remembered Benny and I had this sort of deal going on, this sort of challenge going on about Deadpool or Daredevil videos. We were going to upload Daredevil videos for the rest of the week until Friday, and then of course get into the death of Deadpool probably next week. And so I started doing a search, and I was like, I wonder if there are any stories where Daredevil crossed over with any of the characters from DC Comics. And then I found a Daredevil Batman crossover, and I said, no way. There's no way this actually happened. And I started looking into it and I was like, I have to do this video. So without further ado, this is the first Batman and Daredevil crossover to ever take place, and it came out in 1997. This is called Batman Daredevil, and it's called Eye for an Eye. Now, the way this story picks up, Batman simply just arrives in New York City, and the reason why is because he's been tracking Two-Face. He's been looking for Two-Face. Two-Face had basically been engaging in a series of heists in Gotham City, and one of which was basically him stealing something called a neural net processor. Now, the neural net processor is basically a device that will allow, or I guess is modeled after the human brain, and it's designed to be a computer chip that functions like a human brain, although at the moment, we don't know exactly what it is I guess the Two-Face wants with this thing. So what happens is that once Batman actually arrives in New York, he immediately takes to the sewers to basically try to find what it is that's going on, where it is Two-Face is going, because he knows that Two-Face really isn't going to travel along the normal streets. He's going to go underground. And as he's traveling along this route, he ultimately finds Daredevil. Now, Daredevil at this time is tracking down Mr. Hyde. Now, they don't know that Two-Face and Mr. Hyde are working together at this moment. They simply are just tracking people for their own personal reasons. But once Daredevil realizes Batman is there by virtue of his extrasensory input, the two of them begin to fight. Now, the fight is actually a pretty cool scene whereby they're both able to counter the other's moves. Of course, Batman throws his batarangs at Daredevil, and Daredevil catches them, which I think is probably one of the coolest moments in this whole thing, where Daredevil just simply snatches them out of the air before they actually hit him. In addition, we see the two of them just kind of going through hand to hand, but ultimately, they both sort of agree here that if they're tracking people who may very well be working together, then their goal should be to basically track these individuals down proper, to go after them, to figure out what their plan is, and to end it, as opposed to fighting each other. And so what they do is they effectively team up. Now, what happens is once they go on the prowl and they begin looking for their respective members, for Two-Face and for Mr. Hyde, with Batman and Daredevil proper, they come across what appears to be one of their most recent heists. Now, one of the most recent heists seems to be at a jewelry store. And this seems sort of weird because what seems to be happening is that Two-Face and Mr. Hyde are just going about committing crimes. They're just kind of going on this criminal spree. There doesn't really seem to be a rhyme or reason for why they're doing it. And so what happens is they come across a woman named Wendy Miro, and Wendy Miro has basically been killed. Now, as far as I understand it, Wendy Miro is not a character that has any significance, although I might be wrong here in the fact that she might be a minor character, but as far as I remember, she doesn't really have anything major to do in Marvel. I think she just may very well be a person who was just in the wrong place at the wrong time when this heist was committed, but she's been killed, and so they take her body down, and as Batman says, they're basically going to give her dignity back, to basically bury her properly, but the two of them continue investigating here. Now, ultimately, what happens is that Daredevil begins to piece the pieces together alongside Batman, and what they realize is that if Two-Face has stolen a neural net processor that's designed to tap into the human brain, then from Daredevil's calculations, Mr. Hyde has probably in some capacity consumed this neural net processor. Now, I wouldn't say consumed in the sense that he's literally swallowed it, that in some way the neural net processor is tied into his physiology, and that whenever it is that Mr. Hyde commits crimes, whenever it is that he begins to amp up and use his physical strength, that it pumps the juices, so to speak, where it pumps these pheromones into the chip proper, and it enhances the chip. And so what would happen is that Two-Face would then be able to take this chip and sell it to somebody else for far more than it's worth, because it would be a more enhanced version of its normal neural net processing self. But the problem is that Mr. Hyde would not survive the ordeal. Mr. Hyde would end up being killed. And so this basically seems to be a ruse by Two-Face, whereby he's using Mr. Hyde to enhance the chip, and then Mr. Hyde will die so that Two-Face can turn around and sell the chip. And so what happens is Batman and Daredevil, after realizing this, continue their efforts and ultimately track down Mr. Hyde and Two-Face. Now, when they track them down, they're in the midst of a heist, and Batman is the first one to arrive there. And of course, Mr. Hyde, not knowing who Batman is, basically continues, or I guess goes into the position of fighting Batman, and Two-Face continues to fight Batman as well. Now, Daredevil joins the fray a few minutes after, character. And so you basically have this big conflict between Two-Face, Daredevil, Batman, and Mr. Hyde, all of which are trying to figure out what in the world's going on here. Now, ultimately, we find that Daredevil begins to prey on the nature of Two-Face in the sense that Two-Face needs balance. He needs order. There has to be a coin for him to flip in order for him to decide what the outcome needs to be. But the coin seems to have been taken away by Daredevil, or at the very least, it's not in Two-Face's immediate area where he can grab it. And so what happens is Daredevil begins to prey on this and simply saying that Two-Face himself needs to make a decision, that he has to reach back to Harvey Dent and what Harvey Dent stood for to decide what needs to happen with Mr. Hyde. And so ultimately, what Two-Face seems to do is he takes a syringe, which is designed to neutralize the neural net processor chip. He calculates the syringe accordingly and then stabs Mr. Hyde in the neck with it. Now, we're not really told why it is that Two-Face had basically backed out of the deal with Mr. Hyde, but it seems as though once Mr. Hyde was told what it is that Two-Face's plan was, that he was going to kill Two-Face. And so Two-Face was basically faced with the idea of either losing his life or bringing an end to Mr. Hyde, which of course he decided to bring an end to Mr. Hyde. And so what this does is it brings an end to the conflict with regards to Batman and Daredevil and Mr. Hyde and Two-Face. And so what we'll find, and depending on whether or not you guys like this video, we may do the second one. We may do the crossover that came in 2000 when Batman and Daredevil crossed over yet a second time in Gotham City itself as opposed to New York. With that being said, we're going to bring this video to an end. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, let me know, and I will catch you guys later. Peace. Be sure to follow me on Twitter. There you can keep up with all the updates from Comics Explained and talk to me directly.